Hello everyone, I'm Jane Pointer, host of AZ Illustrated Science. In this special episode, we explore the connection between Native American cultural practices and health. We'll meet a woman who survived abuse and addiction who's now using traditional Native American practices to help others heal. And we'll talk to a panel of experts about the role culture can play in breaking the cycle of trauma and poor health that plagues Native American communities. That's coming up, but first, we go to the Arizona Public Media Newsroom for today's headlines.
The Congressional Budget Office announced today that the Senate's immigration bill will reduce the federal deficit over the next 20 years if it becomes law. According to the nonpartisan CBO, the immigration bill would reduce the deficit by $175 billion in the first decade and an additional $700 billion in the second 10 years. Part of the deficit cut would be brought about by a larger labor force working legally, according to CBO analysts. U.S. Senator John McCain sent a letter to the Forest Service questioning why some Arizona fire departments are not getting paid for sending crews to fight wildfires. The letter comes on the heels of an investigation by the Arizona Republic that found a number of payments to departments are up to a year late. In his letter, McCain tells the Forest Service that there is, quote, simply no excuse that can adequately justify the year-long delay. A forestry official told Arizona Public Media the agency is looking into the concerns the senator cited in his letter. However, the official also said until the agency has had an opportunity to verify the claims, the agency is not commenting on McCain's concerns. The Forest Service did not give a timetable for when that response will be ready. And Pima Community College is forming a plan to get off of probation from its accrediting agency. While many of the issues that led PCC to be placed on probation are internal, the college is looking to the outside for some input on how to solve them. The college is asking the public to serve on several committees that it's forming. Pima's provost, Jerry Migler, has said the committees will likely have up to 300 members, including faculty and staff. You can apply for those committee positions online. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Every week, Sheila Claw-Starr helps hundreds of people all over Tucson recover from mental health and substance abuse disorders. She does it with the traditional Native American prayers and customs she learned as a child. But her ability to heal others began with her own long journey to recovery. Gisela Tellis brings us Sheila's story.
My name is Sheila Claw-Starr, and my mother's side is the Towering House clan. My father is the Black Sheep clan. My maternal grandfather is the Minigoats clan, and my paternal grandfather is the Salt clan, and that's who I am as a woman. And I was born in Redlands, California, and was raised in Howell Mesa, Arizona.
There, artist Sheila Claw-Starr grew up with her grandmother, a Diné elder who taught her the traditional ways.
She would get up really, really early before the sun. She would always be walking from one family to another and visiting them early in the morning and having coffee with them and everything. But before she went walking, she would, go outside and pray. And that one time I asked her, I said, "What are you doing?" I was talking to her in Navajo. I was asking her, "What are you doing?" And she was saying that she was praying. And then she was telling me, "This is what you need to do. This is what you need to start doing." This is the bald eagle feather, and the smooth side of the feather is the spirit side. And then the rough side of the feather is the education, the knowledge side. Usually when I ask a question, like to my elders, they would say, "It just is." My first drink was in 8th grade, and that was at school. And I had a friend of mine who brought, whiskey to school, and she wanted somebody to drink with, so I volunteered, and we both got drunk. So that was my first experience, and after that I didn't drink for another probably like 2 years. Even during high school, I hardly ever drank. You know, I went to parties and stuff, but I hardly ever drank. But I did, you know, get pregnant at a young age, and I ended up with, you know, my first husband at the time, and had 2 kids with him. And so after that, you know, we stayed together for about 9, almost 10 years. And then after that, that's when I took my second drink again. I was really abused during that time also, you know, being married to this person. And I guess couldn't endure it, and then I believed what he said. So a lot of those things that I believed what he told me I was, you know, I drank over all of that. For the first time, I ended up in jail for 4 days. And when I was in jail, I was ashamed. I felt a lot of guilt. I was scared. I felt a lot of pain and hurt, not only for myself, but for my kids. And on the 3rd day, my daughter came, my second oldest daughter, she came to visit me. And I couldn't run no more. I couldn't just ignore her. I couldn't just, you know, do what I used to do. I had to sit there and listen to her. So she cried and she said all the things that she wanted to say to me. I just kind of like put all of that together and just finally put it in my heart and decided, you know, I'm not going to drink no more. And that's what I just wanted it like that because I didn't want my kids to hurt no more.
Sheila came to Tucson to begin her recovery and build a new life.
I relied on my tradition. You know, I just used all of that, what my grandmother taught me, my grandfather taught me, you know, and what they used to talk to me. And I started really listening to them and what, you know, it was just like I was a child again. And I could just hear their voice, you know, through the wind, you know, and I could hear them, you know, being happy and feeling happy.
As she recovered, she met Ray Matias Sr., a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation, on his own journey of recovery. They talked about the suffering they saw among American Indians in Tucson and how they might be able to help.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to welcome each and every one of you here to the circle. This is a talking circle that we're doing this morning. I would say about a month or two going into all of this. We both had a dream.
And these spirit runners were
and
all in white.
I dreamed
And they were tied.
you know, about Creator and how he needed help. And there was a lot of people out there that are in need of help, all the way from the children, all the way to, you know, their parents, grandparents.
Especially with alcohol. Alcohol is the one that put me down to the bottom, and I couldn't get out. And I knew I needed help to get out.
We need to all come back together and come back to our traditions and our culture and our language. You know, all of these things, we started thinking about all of this and how some of it is lost in certain families. We started thinking and trying to implement some kind of program to kind of tie in all of that together. And so that's how we ended up with that One Sacred Nation healing.
I woke up on time. I actually got some sleep. And I beat the sun and I actually watched it come up over the horizon. You know, and then with that...
Word spread about Ray and Sheila's program, and demand for their services grew. Now the pair serves 200 to 300 people each week. They volunteer most of their services.
We're doing it from our hearts. And we know what it's like being an alcoholic, being an addict.
Traditional practices help people come home to themselves, Sheila says.
The question, why am I? Or where am I going? Who am I? And not a lot of them, you know, ever sat down and really thought about that for themselves. And so when they do that and they start questioning and they start wanting to learn and they start, you know, I wonder if I have a clan.
On earth as it is in heaven, give us this day our daily bread.
It all comes from the spirit. Because if you don't know who you are and where you're coming from, the spirit is unbalanced. And so when they get that knowledge back into them, that's when they mend their spirit. And that's when, the spirit is free again.
Showing others the way to freedom has brought Sheila the peace she spent a lifetime chasing.
It just changed my life a lot. I just can't even describe how much it's changed to where, I just feel free now. I've never felt like this before, not ever in my life. And this is what my grandmother and my grandfather taught me. This is where I always hear from them, when I'm in my dream or when I'm outside praying, that you are doing a good job, because this is where you needed to be all this time, but you're finally here and it's okay.
When we return, 3 experts will join us for a roundtable discussion to explore how culture and trauma interplay in Native American health. But first, a look at what's coming up in tonight's NewsHour.
The Taliban announced it will join peace talks with the U.S. and Afghan governments.
We explore the prospects for peace in Afghanistan as its government forces today formally took control of the country's security.
Then the debate over immigration reform gathers steam. Tonight, Ray Suarez talks with Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul.
Legalization is the most important step, and then citizenship is a privilege, and I think we can discuss how we do that down the road.
We examine a new study that finds most education schools are in disarray and poorly preparing the nation's teachers to help students learn.
Special correspondent Kira Kay reports from Myanmar on the violent clashes between Muslims and Buddhists that have displaced more than 100,000 people.
And we close with a different look at Afghanistan through an ancient oral tradition kept alive in 2-line poems.
That's all ahead on tonight's NewsHour.
In a lab, under a microscope, there's a feather.
Maybe it's a bird of prey or a pigeon or a dove.
It's from the stomach of a Burmese python, a species invading Florida's Everglades.
We can go to work on identifying the birds that this nasty snake has been eating.
Think of it as CSI Everglades on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Native American communities suffer disproportionately from drug and alcohol abuse, violence, and suicide. Addressing this problem has forced scientists to examine how trauma, history, and poverty affect health and how culture could help restore it. Here to discuss this complex issue are researcher Tommy K. Begay of the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Natividad Cano, a counselor in the Native Ways program at the Haven Treatment Facility for Women, and Patrisia Gonzales, UA Assistant Professor of Mexican American Studies and author of Red Medicine, Traditional Indigenous Rites of Birthing and Healing. Well, thank you to all 3 of you for coming in for this, what I'm sure is going to be a fascinating conversation. Tommy, let's start with you. Why are the Native American communities so disproportionately high in these abuses of drug addiction and suicide rates and that kind of thing?
I think, there's what we've learned through the decades is there's an association to cultural conflict. And what is at the root of the cultural conflict basically is what's referred to as a historical trauma. These are events that have occurred, tragic events actually, where, as an example, Native American tribes, Native American people have been placed in prison camps that eventually became reservations. And also the concept of the boarding school system for Native Americans, which really the federal Indian policy at the time, we're talking at the turn of the century, was kill the Indian, save the man, basically, to abolish the thinking of the indigenous ways, the indigenous cultures, including the spirituality, the making sense of the world.
But you're actually measuring the effects, right? You're seeing those very specific effects of this historical trauma.
We're beginning to do that now, as far as looking at the impact of stress. But I think there's two components here that we really sort of focus on. One is biology, the other is culture. And culture, learned ways of the next generation. And biology, or the biological component, includes addiction, includes the impact of chronic diseases as a result of cortisol, or perhaps the cytokines that are released in response to stressful situations. So.
And Nati, you're now actually taking some of these Native American rituals and practices and helping women with that. How does that program work, the Native Ways program?
Well, the Native Ways program incorporates and blends Western medicine with traditional healing ceremonies. We have the sweat lodge, we have the smudging ceremony, we have the drumming, we have the talking circle, which really, really helps the women to really connect with themselves and connect with each other in a setting that brings a lot of energy to themselves and to the circle itself for the healing.
And I'm sure you must have seen some great success stories through this program. Give us a sense of some of the things you've seen.
Before the Native Ways program was founded in 2005, the women who would come to treatment would not stay more than 23 hours. They would not stay in treatment because they couldn't really connect to the treatment modality. And since the Native Ways program, the retention rate is really high. It's even higher than the general population. We have retention rates or completion rates of up to 97% of the women who come. And then the relapse rates are even, better than the retention rates.
So just so I understand, you're using a lot of what one might think of as sort of traditional ways of modern medicine, let's say, ways of treating abuse and that kind of thing, and it's sort of wrapped around in this cultural environment?
That's correct.
I see.
Yes.
And so, Patrisia, in your work, you describe in your book about how the indigenous rights and the Native American ways can expand on the way we in Western society think about healing.
Well, I think probably when you said that they take science and wrap it around the culture, I think it's culture that wraps, it's actually blankets than those Western interventions. Because culture for indigenous people are the original teachings, and those original teachings have evolved over thousands of years as people were created and formed as cultural beings, as human beings. And yet culture is very physiological too. Rituals have a physiological impact on your body, right? And so these ceremonies have a physiological impact on the body. And so there's that very ancient knowledge that predates the evolution of Western science as we know it today. There's native knowledge that's its own science, that has a lot of culture within it, and has a totally different understanding of the impact of being able to change the very lives of people, the very vibrations and the energy and matter that people comprise, that now new science and new physics is starting to try to understand. And there's that part of that understanding is contained within those ceremonies and within understanding the spirit of the power of a plant and how when it's gathered in ceremony, how it can have actual emotional and spiritual impact on the person's body.
So then, yeah, Tommy.
One of the outcomes of historical trauma has been really sort of a disconnect to these ways. And so it is through treatment facilities or through other modes of sort of integrating, coming back to really self-identity and self-esteem and self-empowerment. These are powerful components as far as, reclaiming, a sense of identity, reclaiming a sense of a connection, as opposed to continuing to use dysfunctional behavioral ways, which might include chemicals, substance, alcohol, drugs, or even the sense of violence, of control. That was the impact of these historically traumatic events, especially the boarding school system.
So Nati, you were nodding your head there.
Right. I was thinking about in addiction, the individual has a sense of loss of self because of the addiction. And then when the women begin to acknowledge and recognize and honor the traditional ways, it's a sense of finding self as well.
So do you see some of these women transform themselves?
I see them, yes. It's a beautiful thing that happens. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a miracle that happens. And I get to witness that, being there with them when this happens.
How long? I mean, obviously it depends on the woman.
It depends, sometimes a month. By 30 days, I can see a big change. You know, there's an effect, a facial effect. I can see their eyes, and I can see their smile. I can see their walk. You know, their pride. It's just their hope about the process of healing with ceremony and healing with traditional ways. Right. Yes.
And in your book, you were also talking about dreams, working with dreams, and that kind of thing. Give us a sense of that.
Well, I think that dreams for a lot of Native cultures and peoples is a way that it's a way of diagnosing what's happening to that person. Right? And dreams are also embedded, they come out of the culture that you're in, so what's being told to you helps you understand who you are. But dreams, there's all kinds of very, in fact, there are dream people who only have the role of taking care of dreams. They're so important to a people and their health. And so that's one way, for instance, that we can diagnose not only what's happened to them in this time, but even what has happened to them from past experiences across time. But what I wanted to say is that dreams help us to understand how Native people have a different concept of the body. And so there are many, many healing systems, because each culture has its own traditions. So what Western science and medicine doesn't quite understand is that how trauma can impact the body, and even how the spirit can become disconnected and displaced from the body, and even left at a place where a trauma has happened. And so in a lot of the traditional ways, at least for Mexico, and certainly among some of the tribes in the United States, part of the healing has to not only be the talking circles and a lot of the very important therapeutics that happens in therapy, but also recognizing that that person's spirit may have been left someplace. And so that's what then Native knowledge helps us to understand in a very specific kind of way. How do we bring that spirit back so they're actually disconnected from a part of themselves?
Okay, so now you're challenging my Western mind here. What do you mean by I've left?
Well, in psychology, we talk about what's the disassociation, right? Disassociation. Right. You know, you leave your DNA someplace when you sit on a chair, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, in ceremony, sometimes people will be taken to that place, or their clothes will be taken there and rubbed, and there will be prayers said to bring that spirit back to that person, and then other things happen so that the person can come back into integration. So it's a concept that the Western science doesn't quite recognize yet, and yet that belief that a part of your spirit can be left someplace is held by millions of Native peoples, especially peoples who have this connection with pre-Columbian societies. And these ceremonies continue, and people will go to these purification ceremonies to help sweep off the negative feelings and the negative kind of the being out of balance, and then their spirit may be called back from that place. And that is an intervention that is something that is used, and they may also go to a counselor. Or after they've gone to a counselor, they may go to a person of ceremony, because the counseling has brought up all of these emotions, right? And of course, we could say there's stress hormones, right? The adrenal system has been excited from the very experience of having to discuss and re-experience a trauma. But then the traditional healer will help recalibrate them, because that ceremony may last 2 hours, not 15 minutes, not a 30-minute talking session, right? And then, so that's then how you can see how that system of knowledge can be used with another system of knowledge to help that person continue on.
Well, in addition to specific place, there are certain ceremonies that sort of, bring us back to our purpose. Again, coming back to self-identity, self-esteem, and self-empowerment. Let's just take, for example, the sweat lodge. There are many different indigenous peoples that use sweat lodge in a specific way. Some use water, some use just a dry heat. But basically, in sweat lodge, you return to Mother Earth, and you return to, you become an animal, like you get down on all fours as you enter the lodge. You're entering the womb of Mother Earth to have, all the impurities taken out of you, your impurities in terms of your thinking, in terms of your behaving, or in terms of your feelings. And so that's sort of symbolically, that's represented in the sweat, and you come back out into the world, a reborn individual. So that's a sort of coming back to utilizing ceremony in terms of reconnecting with, again, identity in relation to spiritual philosophy.
And symbols, right? Symbols are a fairly large part of aspects of this, is that right?
Well, symbols is a tricky word.
Why?
Because what somebody might call a symbol, somebody might say this is a sacred being.
Aha.
Yeah.
Expound a little on that.
Yeah, Nati was talking about smudging, right? And even being in that circle might be a symbol, but it's a sacred form, right? And that smudge might be somebody's sage, but you see it as alive, and when you burn it and you pray with it and it opens up this door to something we can't see, is that a symbol or is it something sacred,
So what do you think? So obviously, I do not have any Native American roots. Mm-hmm. What do you think that I and others like me really don't understand about the Native American ways and maybe how it impacts the healing that we could all perhaps benefit from even?
Well, I think Patrisia, started out talking about these are ancient ways. There is an understanding of the universe. There's the understanding of the earth. And as beings, we have responsibilities to take care of the earth, to take care of, our children. There are responsibilities that are sort of dictated in the boundaries of life, of living, of a lifestyle. And so you subscribe to that lifestyle based upon the spiritual philosophy, and it might be augmented or changed throughout indigenous people throughout the world. But basically it comes down to sort of my identity, and here are the what's considered taboo, what's considered my roles and responsibilities in order to to fulfill, to bring upon myself that wellness or that sense of wellness. And again, there have been events historically that have happened that have really sort of hacked away at that concept to the point where individuals might feel disconnected. And as a result of that disconnection, it's really easy to perhaps seek a substance, a chemical, to bring that or to numb out from the uncomfortableness of that. So it's important to, again, to come back and reconnect to that identity, ancient ways of living, of seeing the world, seeing the universe.
So a lot of this sounds like you're really trying to have everybody reconnect with who they are and kind of go deep inside and find themselves again in this context and not try and make themselves part of this Western society. Is that part of what it is in the last few seconds that we have?
I believe it is, and I really believe that the individual has that knowledge inside anyway, and it's there. It was there before, and it's still there, and it's been, crushed or with so many layers of so much grief and pain and trauma and addictions and violence that, it's just a process of finding that natural knowledge, gift, or blessing that it's within the individual.
Thank you. We need to leave it there, and thank you so much to all three of you for coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's our show. To post a comment on any of these stories or to keep up with the latest news, go online to our website at azpm.org. I'm Jane Pointer. Thanks for watching.